Greetings, YouTube. I've been offering my advice to someone who's requested it, who is writing a new role-playing game. And we've been talking about how he wants to design the structure of it. And just yesterday he was discussing how he wants to handle combat. And he wants to deal with combat in phases. It's a fine term to use. But his phases are not rigidly defined. They are more open. So they're not necessarily a specific unit of time, but they're going to be how the person describes the situation, and then he would judge that, okay, that's going to take you a single phase, so you can do that now, or that may take multiple phases, and something like that. And that kind of loosely defined situation is not to my liking. Now, this is not going to come as a shock to most people who have listened to my thoughts on gaming mechanics. I like to have an understanding of boundaries. Now, this is not something that is just endemic to my experience with role-playing games. This is something I like in real life. For example, if you hand me a blank piece of paper and my sketch instruments and say, "Sketch me something," I will stare at the blank piece of paper. I will not know what to do. If, however, you hand me a pad of graph paper and hand me my sketching instruments and say, "Sketch me something," I can sketch you something. I need that visual boundaries, the visual boundaries in front of me. I need to know what is present, what isn't present, and what can I do with it. And that is the same for gaming. I want to know that these things right here are where I bump into stuff. And that then once I know what I bump into, what my boundaries are, I can figure out creatively what I can do inside those boundaries, and potentially how can I move those boundaries, because I've been known to attempt to do that. But I need to know them. And there are two sayings, one of which is probably the title of this video, which is, "Good fences make good neighbors." Knowing your boundaries between yourself and the person near you is important. Another phrase is, "Before you tear a fence down, know why it was put up." Before you go removing a rule or a rule mechanic or something, know why did it exist from the beginning. And that's important. Because if you know those things, you know what your boundaries are, and you know why those boundaries were created to begin with, I think you have a better chance of creating an experience, whether it's designing a game or running the game itself, that everyone's going to enjoy. I am not one that's going to be able to get into a game when someone tells me you can do anything. That's the same thing as that blank piece of paper. I am going to have option paralysis. I'm just going to be like, okay, and then I'm not going to know what to do. I will wait till other people react in the group, and I will probably play off what they do. But I am not going to be able to bring forth my own desires because I don't know what the boundaries are. They would develop over time, but I'm never going to be the person that's going to be leading that situation. It isn't going to be an experience that I'm really going to enjoy because those boundaries aren't present. I don't know what I can and can't do yet, and I like to know that. And that doesn't have to be a Pathfinder game, which is very large. It doesn't have to be, a game that possesses 6 or 7, 300-page books. It can be a game that's got 140 pages. But I still need those boundaries. And when it comes to the OGL and things like that, I have the advantage is even if the gaming book doesn't have all of the details, I have in my head a really good idea of what those missing details are because I've used them in more complex versions of that game. For example, if I were to run Gamma World 4th edition right now, the 1992 edition, I would also bring along Radiance because there are gaps in the Gamma World 1992 edition that I feel are wanting. They need to be filled. And the Radiance book, a single volume, fills those gaps for me. Now, I wouldn't be using the Radiance book as the rule system, but I would be referring to it to fill the things that the other game doesn't have. And to me, that would make the experience much more pleasant, both as a player or as a GM. So, I'm asking people out there, How do you feel about boundaries? Do you need them? Do you like to push them? Do you want a game where there are none? And maybe this is where the whole old school, new school divide comes. Maybe this is where the narrative games come in and leave me behind, like Microscope, which I thought was not a game at all, but an exercise in, acting. So maybe this is where the divide is. Maybe I am being left in the rules mechanic dust. I'm not sure. But I am looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the topic.